Parent of a weird kid. How did you react when you realized that your kid did weird, creepy stuff? Please like and subscribe to support this channel. My child is extremely acrobatic. When she was smaller, any attempts to control her were futile. I think she sent at least one other parent into premature labor when it looked like my daughter was going to fall from a high climbing structure. When she was around 4, she started to be aware of the effect she had on adults. I started to say, "Stop that, you're freaking people out." And she would stop. Now, at 9, her gymnastics coach is very enthusiastic about her. I guess my son was weird from conception. He rarely moved and laid transverse the entire pregnancy right up to delivery. After he was born, he had to be held all the time, ended up just getting a sling. He would scream for a good 2 hours every night, for no reason. I always said he was releasing his frustrations. Refused to sleep on his crib as a baby. The only way to get him to sleep was bundled up in his car seat. As he got older, he had some quirks that I just chalked up to his personality. Obsessed with cars and would run them back and forth in the dirt for hours. He was a quiet kiddo and played alone for hours. Had to be very careful with movies. If things got sad, like when Bambi's mother died, he would sob for hours. When he started preschool, his first week was spent under the table. When he was in kindergarten, the teacher started dropping hints. He's an odd yet lovable boy, prefers to be alone, gets upset over odd things. First grade, it finally became obvious to me we had issues. The day he walked out of his classroom on his hands and feet to meet me, I knew we had something going on. He also wore sweats because jeans were too hard. Had to have cold blankets, aka sheets, at night to cover up. Spent hours and hours playing with Legos. Socks and underwear were huge problems. Eating was an issue. He'd get stuck on a food and only eat that, for weeks. He had no friends and didn't want any, said other kids bothered him. Had him evaluated and yup, autistic. Not Asperger's, as he had some serious speech issues. He's now 22, on disability and happily living his life. He still has no friends and doesn't want any. He spends his day playing video games and watching documentaries on Netflix. Just pray he doesn't want to talk to you about it, because he will go on for hours and hours and hours. Lol, in a way I'm jealous. I wish I could be so content with my life. He just goes with the flow, as long as things don't change. Lol, he has no wants. Not because he has everything, but because he's just content with what he has. He only sees today, has no concept of planning for tomorrow. He totally lives in the moment. My daughter, age 5.5, is the weird kid in her class. She's odd in a number of ways. She's super smart, can read at an adult level, not exaggerating, and she's friendly towards other kids. But she just plays differently. She spends about 80% of her playtime pretending to be an animal. Usually it's one particular animal that she obsesses over for months, then she moves on to another. For well over a year, literally her entire world was chickens. Now she's moved on to guinea pigs. She also is very much into the darker, macabre side of life. She talks a lot about dead bodies, cremation, zombies, and the like. She enjoys spending time in the cemetery near our house and checking out the graves. She's also pretty unemotional about stuff that would really upset other children. She tells me she never misses me, or her dad when we're not around, and she was the only one of us that didn't cry when we put our dog down recently. She told me I shouldn't cry so much because we all knew he was going to die soon. I think she's an amazing child and I love the hell out of her independent little spirit, but it definitely takes other kids, and adults, by surprise, and I wonder how she'll get on with other kids as she gets older. She's starting kindergarten next week. My 3-year-old daughter loves old monster movies. I'm in the habit of putting a movie on while I clean the house. I plugged on King Kong, 1933. Next thing I know, my daughter is enthralled. She can't stop screaming, "What's that? A monster?" and crying. Crying when Kong kills a dinosaur. I asked her 5 times if she wanted me to stop the movie and got an emphatic no. Since then, she's gone on to fall in love with Ray Harryhausen films and Godzilla films. She cries her eyes out every time Mothra leaves Earth in Godzilla vs. Mothra, The Battle for Earth. My wife was concerned that a 3-year-old actually enjoys crying and watching movies that make her sad or scared. I just shrugged and found some old Kong and Godzilla toys on eBay. When her friends who are girls come over, she tries to get them to play monsters. They look at her like they have no clue what she's asking. I was a weird kid myself, so my only hope is that I can convey to her that there is nothing wrong with being into things other kids aren't. That it makes her unique and cool and interesting. Not a parent but a friend of mine is extremely weird, and I wonder myself how his parents react. He has several weird tendencies. He absolutely refuses to get a smartphone. He has an old Nokia, and even after we tell him eventually there will only be smartphones, he counters this by purchasing 100 of these phones on eBay just in case. He has no problem having one of us look stuff up on our smartphones though. He hates condiments and meat on sandwiches. When he goes to a deli, he gets just bread and cheese, nothing else. He is terrified of alcohol. Once someone put vodka in a drink of his. He took one sip and had to go to therapy. I come home from work one night to find my darling 2-year-old blonde daughter standing at the top of the stairs staring up at the full moon in her jammies, teddy bear in hand. She should have been in bed by this time. Not wanting to scare her, I walked up the stairs, knelt down next to her and asked her what she was thinking about. I was imagining she would say something childish like, "Is the moon really made of cheese, Daddy?" Something cute like that. Instead, she turns to face me with a very serious look in her face and in a very serious and creepy monotone voice says to me, "We are all in the same cage, 2 years old." I nearly died of fright. I literally recoiled from her and ran back down the stairs backwards. I couldn't believe it. She said a few more creepy things like that, but it stopped after a while. Update. That was 12 years ago. She has since turned into a very happy and well-adjusted teenager who is only slightly in league with Satan. Winking face. All these weird stories reminded me of this thread about shit kids say. *******. I was visiting family for winter break in Los Angeles. This was about 5 years ago. I was heading to the bathroom on the second floor of my aunt's house when I saw my cousin, April, on the stairs. April was 4 and very animated. She was busy making funny faces while sitting on the stairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm copying the lady with the braid." I looked around, there was no one else but us. I asked, "Where is the lady, April?" She pointed to a beam running parallel to the stairwell. I asked April, "What is the lady doing?" She said, "Making funny faces." I smiled and started walking up the stairs again when April said something that stopped me in my tracks. April, her braids is around her neck. I turned back and asked April to repeat herself. April pointed, "The lady is hanging by her braid. She's making funny faces." Then April started making a face which I then realized was it someone gasping for air. ****, creepy as balls. And I don't care what people say about no sleep, it's exaggerated at best. Closing parenthesis. My youngest son is pretty weird. Creative, funny, smart, but weird. Last year he was upset because it made him feel isolated. He has friends but he knows his mind works different from theirs. He isn't on the spectrum, he just makes intuitive leaps and mentally connects information in a way that isn't traditional. I reacted by crawling into his bunk bed with him and cuddling him. I held my 8-year-old and told him that being weird is okay. I told him that I was pretty weird myself and that while it meant that you wouldn't connect with everyone, the people you do find as friends are going to be true and amazing friends. I told him that being normal was boring and if anyone ever teased him for being different, then fuck those kids because it isn't like these are the people he is going to be hanging out with in 20 years. Then we arranged for some counseling so he could talk to a professional about it and be reassured that no one is as normal as they seem. My kid has been the weird kid since about 2 years old. His favorite bedtime stories were the user manuals to my appliances. At 3 he became obsessed with human biology and would watch open heart surgeries on YouTube. He was also obsessed with vacuums, for 4 years. He would spend hours in department stores demonstrating to shoppers how to use them. At 5, his summer plans was to teach himself mechanical engineering and physics. I could go on. When he turned 3 is when I started to suspect he was different. It scared the fuck out of me. He was my firstborn, so I had no idea if he was developing normally or not. His thirst for knowledge became extreme and I didn't understand how to handle him, so at 4 I sent him to a child psychologist. I was terrified my son would have a nervous breakdown, because although he was so young, he never once in his life, played. All he did was learn. The psychologist made it clear to me that he was gifted, but that I had to force him to play. Otherwise he would develop OCD and other disorders. I'm trying to make this short. He is 8 now, and still different, but he does play. Sometimes. I'm happy he is who he is, but I can see that he has a difficult life ahead of him. He doesn't have many friends. Mainly because he would rather discuss the news than some new game or toy. I can say this though, I don't think I'll ever meet another human being who is anything like my son, and I love that about him. I was reading on our porch the other day when I heard my 11-year-old stepson say he was going for a ride around the neighborhood. I said okay without looking up from my book, then saw he glide down our driveway on a razor scooter in a Grim Reaper robe. He's not creepy weird, just entertaining weird. He also had his sister perform a wedding for him and our dog last year and won't let the joke go that the dog is his wife. The little boy my granda took in is really creepy, but no one else sees it but me. He is obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's and guns. He has so many toy weapons it's worrying. He also likes to tell me in detail how he is going to kill me and my grandma. All he does is sit at the computer and play Minecraft. He makes these really complicated machines to kill NPCs and then he laughs when they die. He also likes to attempt to get into the bathroom when anyone is doing anything in there, so he can watch. When my son was around 2 years old, he was obsessed with the phrase, "the ship sinks in the water." He'd said something like, "Acout agua," for Spanish, "el barco se hunde en el agua," while making a gesture with his hand emulating a sinking ship, his hand upside down, bent a little to form a ship, and putting it down slowly. He talked about it constantly, and even asked me for YouTube videos of sinking ships. I used to indulge him to see his reaction, and it was kind of weird to see his glee while looking at those videos. To everyone he met, familiar or unknown people, the first thing he'd said was that phrase. He would come to you randomly, say it, and then he'd go off like nothing. His obsession has moved to Mario Brothers nowadays. My youngest daughter, around the age of 4 or 5, used to tell me she was going to chop off my head. Eventually it escalated to, "Daddy, if you do that I'm going to chop off your head and cook it on the barbecue." She's 10 now and will laugh with a fondness in her chuckle that she remembers that and still thinks it's hilarious. We told her that, although we laughed our asses off at hearing this, it really isn't funny and I would prefer to not be decapitated and subsequently cooked on my grill. I'm fairly certain she doesn't want to kill me. I was changing in front of my daughter when she was around 2. 5. She grabbed my boobs and said, "Mama, I like your boobs. They are pretty." I said thank you but told her not to touch other people's boobs. She can only touch her own. This resulted in full meltdown toddler mode. "I don't want to touch my boobs, I just want to touch your boobs." She still randomly tells me I have nice boobs and it weirds me out. Weird kid here. Was adopted by my grandparents in my teens but they basically raised me. Spent a lot of time there growing up months upon months some years. Parents were abusive. I'm bipolar and was pretty obsessed with death self-mutualization anything sad dark or scary. They never addressed it outright but took ample time to assure me that I was loved had support and sent me along to do tasks on the farm that I hated but later appreciated. Many times I came home drunk or high and they would just ask if everything was alright. I'd say yes, stumble into my room and write. The next morning was always greeted with a hug and attempt to feed me breakfast and a task to do. Be homework, actual work, or a soft suggestion to see friends. Looking back, what they did wouldn't have worked with a lot of other kids. Never would have sobered up ECT, but they really knew me better than I did. Though after listening to Manson a bit too loud, they introduced me to polka music. Still don't enjoy it, but it always makes me smile.
My daughter is super weird. Not in a creepy way, but in the way that will most likely get her picked on as she gets older. We embrace it. Make sure she knows that being weird is not only okay, but a good thing. That is makes her unique. When the day comes that she does get picked on, it's gonna suck for her. Not as much as us telling her not to be herself would though.
Hopefully if we reinforce that is okay, and that she should be proud of it, she will brush up the mean things kids can say. So when I was like 3 I became like obsessed as fuck with Hitler. I think it was because I saw World War II documentaries and Hitler looked like a total badass with the armies and pomp and splendor and whatnot. My parents, wanting to foster my interests in history, bought me the Encyclopedia of the United States at War and read it to me before bedtime. I would have them read to me about Hitler over and over again and then go to class in pre-K and tell the other kids about Hitler. I watched hours and hours of history documentaries because I was obsessed. This fascination also led me to tell my parents that people that were loud at restaurants must be Jewish. My parents were called in for a PTA meeting and they were instructed to stop telling me about Hitler because the other kiddos were starting to like him too. My kid is into nature documentaries. Very into nature documentaries. One day, when he was 3 years old, my wife was getting his bath ready. She was bent over the tub, checking the water temperature. My son shoved his face in her ass, took a huge whiff, walked away and said, "Ah. Dominant female butt." I have since realized not only is he into nature and its beasts, but he retains almost anything he sees while watching those educational shows. He is also most likely going to be an ass man. My friend has a friend who has a kid whose behavior is very concerning, at least when she tells me stories about this kid. He is 6 years old, and one day he had a playdate with a girl and both parents were hanging out in the kitchen or whatever. He kissed this girl on the mouth after she told him not to and then physically covered her mouth so she couldn't tell on him. Obviously she did as soon as she was free. He also barged into the bathroom when my friend was at their house and going to the bathroom because he wanted to see her naked. It also doesn't help that his mom still wipes his ass for him, I'm being literal here, and b. She still showers with him because he doesn't know how to bathe himself and doesn't like being in the bathtub by himself. He is almost 7. I've never met this kid, only seen pictures, and I shudder every time I hear about him. I don't think he's going to be good at making friends. Which makes me sad. As a creepy kid growing up, I can tell you what not to do. I spent most of my childhood silently watching people and catching bugs by myself. My mom had zero clue what to do with me, so, although she was never anything but well-intentioned, treated me the same as my outgoing, overachiever older sister. She pushed me to join groups and do things, and that made me withdraw even more from other people, and she would be furious when I inevitably stopped going or hid, or ignored people and just read a book instead of whatever thing I was doing. Needless to say, that was not helpful for a kid already showing signs of a severe anxiety disorder. And when my dad died when I was 12, I felt like I also lost my only advocate and friend. I went into a shell that I wouldn't emerge from for a decade. It wasn't an easy way to grow up, and at 30 I still struggle with anxiety and avoid personal relationships, mostly because I didn't develop the social skills as a kid needed to make friends. I have no idea what I'm doing. Mom, who has mellowed considerably from when we were kids, actually apologized to me for the treatment. She did the best she could but realized that I would have probably benefited from support and encouragement more than anger. I also probably should have been seeing a therapist throughout childhood. C'est la vie, I suppose. But I would highly encourage anyone with a weird, creepy child to listen closely to them, avoid anger, and to not be at all shy about getting them to a therapist. My wife's son, from a previous relationship, is 12 years old, and ever since I've known him, since he was 5, still won't talk in a normal person voice or volume, if that makes any sense. He will talk in all sorts of weird, overly animated voices or tones. I ask him to stop talking like that, but I truly don't believe he could if he tried. He is pretty introverted with anxieties we are working on, but that is the weirdest thing. My only reaction to that is it's hard to take anything he says seriously. I have a hard time wanting to have conversations with him because it bothers me that I don't get a solid answer out of him or feel like we could have a real conversation. After working with him for so long to try and remedy it, I feel defeated sometimes. With love. My daughter has Asperger's and is about to start her 2nd year in middle school. Middle school girls aren't known for their empathy, and while we've worked tirelessly for about 10 years to help her get along socially, it's exhausting for her, and she's probably the weird kid at school. She's got a small number of friends that will hang out with her individually, i.e. not during school time, but get them in a group situation at school, and a larger social dynamic of middle school girls kicks in, and she's left out. So yeah, my daughter's the weird kid. She's also loving and funny and an honors student and into anime and Minecraft and theater. My kid is a classical musician. We're the village idiots, so I have no idea where this talent came from, but he is known as the weirdo in the family. Don't get me wrong, we're very proud, and there really is nothing quite so moving as listening to the planets live from some major performing arts center. It has been a real education for us. Alas, we really don't fit in when we attend his concerts, and we are the weirdos.